Welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of WORKOLOGY.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of WORKOLOGY.
A lot of time is spent on the subject of breaking into HR, but not enough time about how to grow your career, change your path, and create a legacy. According to Data USA, there are 804,000 professionals working in HR in the U.S. The HR profession is growing at a rate of just under 8% each year. My next guest loves HR, but was looking for a change, a reinvention, if you will, for her own self and in her career. I'm excited to dive into this topic as increasingly we are looking for new jobs, new challenges, or ways to reinvent our lives as they change, evolve, and grow. Today I'm joined by Angela Shaw. Angela is an HR manager at Forma Space and the president of the Austin Human Resources Management Association. Angela, welcome to the WORKOLOGY podcast.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to be here.
So today we're talking about career reinvention and what that looks like working in human resources. So let's talk a little bit about your background, because you have a successful career working for a variety of different companies in human resources.
So a little bit about my background. So I've been in love with HR for going on 20 years now. I think it's the opportunity to touch people is what really drew me in. And actually, that's what keeps me in HR. I feel like my love of HR grows stronger every single day. When I first started to work in HR, it was for state government. That really gave me a great base for HR structure. So what kind of skills do I need to have? What does the actual work involve? And it was a very structured way of performing the HR function. In 2011, I left state government and went to the private sector. And the job that I ended up landing was my first management role. And I received the opportunity to actually build HR and the function from the ground up. So that was very exciting. And it taught me, I feel like, the best and also the worst of everything that I know about HR. So I think because of that experience and where I've gone since then, I have a really broad-based HR experience. So I've literally done almost every function in HR. I've really grown my career after that step from being a tactical HR person to being a strategic business partner. And I see myself as a HR leader in an organization as the conduit for culture and communication. So really just that middle person who helps the organization run smoothly, or that glue that's needed to stick everybody together.
I love that. And you're so right. HR really is the glue that keeps the organization together. The thing is that most people inside the organization don't really know that HR is the glue.
I would agree with that. A lot of times, or whenever I go to a new organization, I always try to start out with talking to the employees about my HR philosophy and what my role in HR is. And so that's really helpful for them, because whatever they've experienced before, I can introduce them to something new. So I would definitely agree that people don't necessarily know that HR is the glue.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you have reinvented your career, since that's the topic today. So I know that you've worked in some different industries, but when you think of career reinvention in HR for yourself, what does that look like?
So for me, the catalyst was really the job change that I had when I went from state government to the private sector in 2011. That was really when my reinvention started. So right before that, or a few years before that, I'd gone through some personal challenges. So gotten a divorce and kind of went from this one kind of future to, hey, I have a different future now. So after coming out of that, I realized that I needed to make some long-term decisions about having a successful career. I made the decision that I wanted to have a successful career. I wanted to financially be able to take care of myself and leave a legacy that I could be proud of. So with that step in my career, going from state government to private sector, That's what really introduced me to networking and volunteer leadership. And those two things, along with hard work, is what reinvented my career. I went from a person working in HR to an HR leader with a bright future. And I didn't want that to go to waste, this bright future. I didn't want it to go to waste. I've always been a hard worker because that never goes out of style. So I know that sounds cheesy, but it's the truth. I realized, though, that I needed more than that to really be able to break through a lot of the barriers that I face as an underrepresented woman of color. So that's when I got into volunteering with my local HR association that led to networking, which is another way to actually show off my hard work. I would also say that once I made that shift to private sector, that's when I started to set goals for myself every year. I realized that one of the best ways to avoid staying stagnant in your career is by continuously growing and learning. And so I've always tried to do something new every year to continuously grow and to add skill sets to my toolbox.
Awesome. Well, life throws us all curveballs. I have been really honest about some of those for myself, including divorce, having children, relocating a couple different times, and then other things along the way. And we're not alone in those personal and professional changes like you're talking about. Turns out that career uncertainty is not unusual. And a 2018 LinkedIn study found that 47% of experienced career professionals, 35 to 44, were sleepwalking through their careers. So they said they were sleepwalking and they didn't have a clear sense of direction. I wanted to ask you, how do you decide what to focus on in terms of those specific goals that you give yourself? What's the secret sauce that you use?
Well, I think paths are not always straight. And a lot of times people feel like there's going to be this straight path to wherever they want to go. So that's the first thing I realized. So even in setting goals, sometimes they change, or sometimes you don't reach that goal, but you do something else. So that flexibility, I think, is very important. The truth is, discrimination, unconscious bias, and microaggressions do exist. And so for me, as a woman of color, these are the barriers that can prohibit me, a worthy candidate, from being successful. And so I really wanted to figure out how I get around those barriers and how I could do something positive with the sometimes negative feelings that different situations I came away with feeling. So what do I do with that? Unfair treatment, the playing field not being level. And that's really what I use to make these decisions about the goals that I set. It has helped lead me to wanting to be the best qualified candidate. So how do I add things of value to myself that make me that best qualified candidate that will get me around these barriers that we all know actually exist? So the goals that I pick, they add value. Getting certified in HR, pursuing my bachelor's degree in my 30s, making career stops in different industries, the volunteer leadership. These were all specific goals that I set to make me stand out as an outstanding professional whose reputation precedes her. I feel like I don't have the luxury of sleepwalking through my career. I haven't always had a clear path either. But if I want to be successful, then I have to continue to work towards these goals.
I like this attitude. And I think that we've talked about discrimination before on the podcast. I did an interview with a friend of mine, Joe Weech, who talked about age discrimination. And certainly that's a challenge. But there are lots of different kinds of discrimination. And your approach of thinking about what you can control yourself, and then what sort of tools in your tool belt and skills and things can you gain so that without question, you're up there and they can't ignore you for any reason.
Exactly.
I think is a really positive one. And I just like it because it's not really focused on, like, I think sometimes we get caught up in the victim mentality, but you're like, here I am. I have a goal. I have a path that I'm going to work on. And this is how I'm going to get there, and I'm going to make it happen.
Exactly. That is exactly what I do, yes. And I feel like that will make anyone who wants to be successful get to where they want to go.
Well, that same study that I referenced just a minute ago about the sleepwalking in the career for the 35 to 44-year-olds, that same study found that 80% of those who are new in the workforce, so not seasoned or experienced like you and I, they also had feelings of uncertainty. So maybe we're talking to some new HR leaders here. They're listening in and they're new in the workforce and they're feeling uncertain and having some career anxiety. What tips or suggestions do you have for them in terms of focus and goals?
I would say to definitely first figure out what they ultimately want to accomplish. And as with any goals, if you talk to anybody about setting goals, it's always, 90 days, a year, 3 years, 5 years. So if they can even look out that far. But I would definitely say every new year, setting your goals for that year. So figure out ultimately what you want to accomplish. Then break that down into those monthly, weekly, or daily goals if needed. You have to write them down. They have to be real to you. And then you have to find ways to hold yourself accountable. And then work towards them every single day. So, for example, in 2018, I wanted to achieve my senior level HR certifications. So I had the lower levels. First quarter was to research the certification costs, research the study options, research when the exam was given. Second quarter, I set up my study plan. So do I want to be a part of a group? Do I want to study on my own? What does that look like? Third quarter, applying for the test, so make it happen. And then fourth quarter, taking the test. So ultimately, my goal was by the end of 2018 to be both an SPHR and a SHRM SCP. I was able to achieve the SPHR, and even though I signed up for the SHRM exam, I haven't actually taken it yet. So I still have a couple of months to get it taken. However, I think that's a great example of sometimes you don't always get to the very end of what you've set out for yourself, but I made good progress towards it. I'm 75% of the way. So I just use that example as it's specific, and then you break it down into the different parts as you need to be able to meet those goals.
I love it. And congratulations on getting your SPHR. I have taken the exam. It is the most stressful, hardest test in my life. So you should be very proud of yourself.
Thank you, I am. And I would say, though, just coupled with everything else that I had going on this year, I do actually feel really good about at least getting that one.
Well, in a couple months, I know that you'll also be an SCP with SHRM, so I'm not worried about it at all. And I don't think you should be either. But man, those last 2 months, the home stretch before you take the exam, it can be a little intimidating.
Yes, I agree.
Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller-Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast. Today we are talking with Angela Shaw about career reinvention in human resources. You can connect with Angela Shaw on LinkedIn. A special thank you to our podcast sponsor, Clear Company.
This podcast is sponsored by Clear Company. Clear Company is the world's fastest growing talent management platform, allowing companies to easily hire, retain, and engage more A-players. Visit clearcompany.com to sign up for a free demo.
I think that sometimes working in HR, we are so focused on the developmental plans of our leaders and our teams that sometimes we forget about our own personal and professional development. Can you tell me about something bold you've done for your personal development that scared you?
Yes, I'm a big believer in professional development and definitely personal development. I started public speaking last year, and it was super scary for me. Some of the things that I was worried about, imposter syndrome, am I good enough? I was worried about having an actual message to spread. Are people going to want to hear what I have to say? And I was just worried about whether or not it was good. So I'm the poster child for the underrepresented person, and I often tell people that I've been a woman of color my whole life, so I know what that struggle is about. And I speak from that experience, and I hope to be able to influence and inspire others to action. I also hope that when I speak in using my personal experiences, that connection with the people I am speaking to, that it helps them want to give the next underrepresented person that they come across a fair shake, because historically that has not been the case. So my goal last year was to have 4 speaking engagements, and I ended up with having 14, which to me was phenomenal. And it also reinforced my thought that if you put something out into the universe and it comes back to you, then that means it was meant to be. So when I put it out there that I wanted to be this public speaker and I wanted to connect with people and I wanted this message of hope and perseverance, I wanted to share that. And I got it back so much, so huge, it feels like that was meant to be. And so I feel really good about that, even though it's a very scary thing to get on a stage and talk to people and to talk about a subject that is so personal to me.
I want to point out to folks that are listening here that Angela isn't just the kind of person, and this is my opinion, she's not the kind of person to just wait around for somebody to say, hey, Angela, you want to come and speak at my event. She is a go-getter, somebody who goes out there. She is bold, and I'll give you an example of that. I got a LinkedIn email message or a LinkedIn message that said, hey, Jessica, I didn't realize you had a podcast. I want to talk on your podcast about some stuff that I'm doing. And I really like that. Not very many people say, hey, I'm interested, certainly that are HR practitioners. I get a lot from the vendors. They're trying to sell us the software. I understand. I'm in sales and marketing myself. But from the practitioner side, I don't get very many messages like that. So she is someone who's putting herself out there. And so those 14 speaking events that you got, certainly once you got yourself out there, word traveled that you're the person who they need to be talking at their event. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about your volunteer work, because you are very involved in the local HR community and in helping the profession here. So talk us through some of the things that you're doing.
The volunteering piece, especially in HR, it started back with the same job. 2011 was such a big year for me. So just making that change from government to private sector has been everything for me. In that specific position, we did a lot of hiring. So I was always looking for ways to enhance our talent pool. And we ended up partnering with a local workforce solutions center to help us find candidates. And we ended up winning a community award for second chance hiring, which was quite an accomplishment for our organization and one that I'm still proud of today. During that time, we also partnered with a staffing agency, and it was through that staffing agency that I was actually introduced to the right people in the local Williamson County HR Association. So through my hiring in the community, Wilco HR invited me to be on a panel talking about workforce readiness. And it's the story of the rest is history. The next year, I volunteered to be on the committee with Wilco HR, and in 2014, I was tapped as president-elect. So I always knew ultimately I wanted to get to ARMA, but I was very intentional about starting with Wilco HR first. It's a smaller chapter, more homegrown, just the opportunity to get in and make sure I was good at it and something that I liked and be able to touch that community first, and then went on to ARMA. You know, I cherish the opportunity to be considered as a leader in the HR community. It feels wonderful to me. Besides Wilco HR and ARMA, I've also served at the state level. So I served a year as Texas SHRM Director of Diversity. And since 2017, I'm also a committee member on the Educational Sessions Committee for HR Southwest, which is one of the biggest regional SHRM conferences, and it's held in Fort Worth every year. I'm a quote person. I love quotes. There is a quote, volunteers don't necessarily have the time, they just have the heart. And I really feel like that quote describes me and that this is my legacy. So as a servant leader, I help support and lift up everyone that I can, and especially those who are underrepresented. When I think about volunteering and just giving back to the local community, it goes back to that servant leadership and me being able to build a legacy through that, and that's why I do it. So it feels special to be in an organization and do HR and show people good HR, but it takes it to the next level when I can touch people who go back to their organizations and touch other people, and then it really becomes a community thing, and that feels really good.
Let's talk a little bit about your work in the coming year as president of the Austin SHRM chapter. What do you guys have in store, and what are you really excited and proud of that you're doing there or going to be doing there this year?
Yeah, so I think it's really a eye-opening and wonderfully supportive experience when you volunteer for an association. And so for me with SHRM, that's what it feels like. I've made exceptional friendships, I've formed very important partnerships, and I've grown as a leader through these volunteer roles. But it's also helped me in seeking to understand others. So our Austin chapter is growing, and I'm most proud of the fact that in 2019 we will be pressing for progress in our organizations and our community at large in Austin, Texas. And this progress that I speak of is related to inclusiveness. So ARMA is a place where everyone belongs, and that will be our platform next year and our theme. So we're going to continue offering our usual core programming. We have monthly meetings where we have people come in and talk about subjects that HR people want to hear. We also have a very successful and famous mentoring program. We have a long-standing tradition of offering certification study groups. And we have an award-winning leadership program that's called Stepping Stones to Enhance Leadership that just celebrated 10 years of existence. So we will continue all of that core programming. It's our 69th year this year, and so I'm just super excited to be able to represent diversity in leading ARMA this year.
I love it, and I love that really Austin HR has such a history associated with it, and you are helping build the future HR leaders of tomorrow. I mean, you really are with all the good things that you guys are doing.
Thank you. Yes, we are. It's going to be a great year. It's very exciting.
I know it's only January, but I feel like it might be March or April before we know it. Last question I wanted to ask you. You know, we talked a little bit about your thoughts and feelings on diversity and inclusion in the workplace. And in fact, you recently spoke at TEDx, which I think is wonderful, and I can't wait for your talk to come out. Can you talk with us a little bit about your talk and maybe some of the conversations you've been having on the subject of workforce diversity and just diversity in general?
My talk was specific to my experience as a woman of color in the world, the challenges that I have faced and how I have chosen to deal with them. As humans, we tend to fixate on differences instead of similarities. And that's really what my talk was about. So as a woman of color, I've often been labeled the angry black woman. But the truth is, vibrant human beings express a wide range of emotions, black women too, and that includes me. And that's a direct quote from my talk. Or we should all rush to grant one another grace instead of using labels to hurt one another. I really believe that to be true, and I personally practice that. So granting grace to others when they don't know, or when they do things that come from a place of they just don't even know that they're doing it. When I talk about diversity and inclusion and all the conversations that I've been having over the last year and I will continue to have, it's always from the perspective of the underrepresented person. So I am Laquisha, whose resume does not get reviewed because of her name. I am the candidate that graduated from an online university, so I'm considered a second-class citizen. So I speak about people like me being considered on a level playing field and receiving the same opportunity as everyone else to be the best candidate, a high performer, and have a seat at the executive table. So my goal is to individually influence and inspire people to action. We need more action surrounding diversity and inclusion so that collectively we can make a difference. I believe in the reach one, teach one method or mentality. People ask me a lot why I talk about diversity and inclusion. And there are actually people out there who are surprised that I talk about diversity and inclusion and say things like, oh, do you think there's still a need for that? And yes, there is. So I always say I talk about it so that I can represent the underrepresented person, so that the next time you individually come into contact with one of us, that you might look at them differently, and you might see them for who they are and not what they've been labeled. And so those are the conversations that I'm having in the community about diversity and inclusion.
I love that you're stepping up and having these, because I do think that more conversations need to be had. I've done a lot of work in diversity and inclusion in the area of people with disabilities. And I think that all these inclusive and diversity conversations that are happening are helping one another and helping us ask questions, do some self-reflection, have candid conversations with others, give each other a little grace as we all learn.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
I appreciate you taking the time to talk about this. I also want to thank you for stopping by the Workology podcast. Where can people go to learn more about Angela Shaw and what you do?
Well, right now, that would definitely be my LinkedIn. So that's where the most information about me is going to be. So if you look up Angela L. Shaw on LinkedIn, you will find me. Yeah, that's where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Well, we'll link to your LinkedIn profile, and then I'll also put a link into the ARMA website. So if people want to learn more about ARMA and all the really cool things that you guys have in store in the history of the ARMA SHRM chapter, we'll include that as well. But thank you for taking the time to talk with us.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you agreeing to have me on your podcast. And I wish you much success and continued good work that you're also doing in the HR community.
Thank you. I wanted to take a moment to introduce you to my daughter. She's going to talk real quickly about something that she's working on and passionate. I appreciate your support and taking the time to listen to my daughter.
Hi, my name is Riley Merrill. I am Jessica Merrill's daughter. I am selling Girl Scout cookies. Go to workology.com/Girl Scouts to order your cookies. For every 10 boxes you buy online from me, Workology will give 1 box to Operation Cookie Drop. Thank you for supporting Girl Scouts.
I really love Angela's honesty and her willingness to share her successes, challenges, learnings, and struggles. I find it takes a lot of courage to do so. Career reinvention is very personal, and it starts with really taking the time to get to know and understand and listen to yourself. And I think that spending some time getting to know ourselves is something we could all do a little bit more of. I hope that Angela's journey has inspired you. I know it has me. A special thank you to our sponsor, Clear Company. Have a great day.